All those fancy awards just mean I'm really good at reading the glass. No, but I really do love my job. I love Western New York, and I'm so thrilled and honored to be in this room with all of you tonight. I love being in person again. Isn't that amazing? Doesn't it feel so good? Right? Zoom meetings, they're here to stay, but it's so nice to see people in real life. The other thing that I love about being in a room full of business professionals is that there is such a melting pot of ideas here. So many people are interacting, trying to figure out what's next, what's up and coming, who's there right now, and how we get there. And I love that about Western New York business leaders. So give a round of applause for yourselves. This is wonderful. So I'm going to introduce tonight's panelists. In 2016, Martin Griffith was appointed as president of Bank on Buffalo, a division of C&B Bank. His more than 20 years banking experience also includes commercial and small business lending positions. And before that, he actually headed land development for a family business, Griffith Builders in Canandaigua. In 2019, he also assumed the role of Executive Vice President, Community Banking, where he was responsible for the retail strategy for the entire corporation. Most recently, Marty was promoted to Senior Executive Vice President and Chief of Community Banking for CNB Bank. So give a warm welcome to Martin Griffith. He's getting mic'd up right now. And Marty, we'll have you take a seat. Dr. Irfan Khan is the founder and CEO of Circuit Clinical. Over the last 5 years, he's overseen Circuit Clinical's growth to more than 2 million patients, involving 30-plus multi-specialty physician practices and partnering with multiple accountable care organizations. Dr. Khan is a board-certified cardiac electrophysiologist. Wow, is right. He's passionate about community engagement and patient education and empowerment. He's a frequent speaker at both academic and public health conferences, including TEDx. Most recently, his work at Circuit Clinical is centered on the development and deployment of technologies to assist patient experience and engagement in clinical trials through Trial Journey, which is the first ever platform that provides patient ratings and reviews of clinical trials sites. Very cool. A warm welcome. Dr. Rohan Shah, I'm sorry. Rohan
Not
Shah,
yet.
the CEO and founder of InteractiveX, the company that created Classavo. It can be best described as an all-in-one teaching and learning platform that helps professors engage students through interactive content, including digital textbooks that professors can edit, adding features like videos, photos, graphics, notes, and questions that students can answer in the text. Rohan's recent focus has been growing the sales team and fundraising. He was also named on the esteemed Forbes 30 Under 30 list this year. He is an alum of the University at Buffalo with a background in computer science and business. Welcome to all of you. So we'll start tonight's panel. We want to respect your time. I know we have about an hour to go here, so let's get right into it. We'll start with a question for each of you here. What do you attribute your growth to over the past year? And Rohan, we'll start with you.
Sure. Man, I don't even know where to start. So many things. But really, I really attribute the success and growth in the past, especially in the past recent years. It's really, it's all about having a really great team and people around you who are nimble enough and able to change to different times, different circumstances. So I think one of the really key things that happened to our business is when COVID hit us, right? All the education was completely changed, or it was more of a catalyst to a change that was about to come. Maybe it's 2-3 years out. But one of the reasons that we were really successful in the last few years is because the team was able to change with the times. So I think I really attribute our success for having a great team, but really grateful for it. They're able to change. I don't know how many of you guys read the Who Moved My Cheese, but it's really the same exact thing. But I've been really grateful to build a team around in Buffalo, in Western New York, that actually is going along, and I'm also learning with them.
Dr. Khan.
Yeah, everybody calls me Irfan. So it's, and maybe that's part of it too, is I would echo that completely. There's things you can control, things you can't control. We've been benefited by the fact that something happened we couldn't control, but we had the kind of people on the team who were very nimble and very able to respond to that. So we spend a ton of our time on recruiting the kinds of people who are passionate about making a difference. They're looking for a mission they believe in. When COVID hit, the clinical trials industry actually ground to a complete halt for a quarter. And it wasn't really clear that any of the clinical trial companies were going to be viable through the thing, and especially startups. And so we were at about, I think, 18 employees when it first happened back in March a year and a half ago. And if you look at what kind of came our way, it was really just figuring out how to stay relevant through that, that 1 quarter window until things like the PPP showed up. And it was really about not doing things like, for example, we didn't lay anybody off when there was a lot of layoffs happening. And the feeling was that maybe we wouldn't make it, but we would be in a good spot for having just kind of hung tough if we did make it, and that if we did lay people off, we were afraid that we'd break the culture and we'd never be able to get back to that kind of we're all in this together doing something really important. So we got very fortunate that PPP came along. It was really a lifeline, and then as soon as it was coming to an end, the clinical trials industry came back on, and we had actually grown through that. And so since then, if you look at that window, it was 20 employees. Now we're at 60 and spread out across 4 states and growing pretty quickly. And that was, we're still headquartered here. Half our team will always be based in Western New York. And they're great jobs in life science and technology. But that was all predicated on having the people in place who tolerate the risk of that 1 year plus of anxiety. So I really attribute it mostly to the leaders in the team.
Marty?
Well, we talk about PPP and the importance of PPP for a lot of different businesses. And a lot of folks in this room may know this, some may not, but because it was being administered so quickly and it involved the federal government and then it involved the SBA to provide guidance as to what we were supposed to do, most banks, ourselves included, were waiting until 3 and 4 in the morning for a couple of weeks straight, trying to get access to the portal system so that we could help our clients. And so, I think this past year was a year of conviction, and it was hanging in there and working through some challenging times. But I think more than anything, we kind of buckled down and did what we always like to say we do, and that is, add value to our relationships. And there were a lot of emotional phone calls from clients that were struggling, and still to today to some degree. But early on in the process, we had almost 25% of our borrowers that were in some form of payment relief. And at the end of the day, what that made us do is really realize that we were lending into management. We were no longer lending into cash flow or lending into collateral. We were lending into management. And I think we got to know our clients even better this past year.
If I may just follow up, so you all mentioned certain aspects of business, being nimble, the culture of a business, and really the management, how key management is. Talk about that as managers, how you were able then to relate your experience and perhaps develop more personal relationships with your staffers or your clients through COVID.
I'll take the shot at that. So we have organized Circuit around, we're looking for a very particular kind of person. That person comes in every ethnicity, race, orientation, but they're all motivated by a set of ideas that are really key to how we could scale a research company. And what we do is we bring clinical trials to your doctor's office. We do that with technology and people, but really it's the other way around. It's with people using technologies that make it possible. And so, we were a business first best workplace 2 years ago, and then through the pandemic, the team voted Circuit and Inc. magazine best places to work, which is, when you think about that. So anybody running a company or serving in leadership knows that that's the team, right? Like they get anonymous surveying. We do it because we get great people ops. And it's really, if you take those people ops and you use them, that intelligence you get on what your team thinks about you, and you build a better company year over year, you can do some incredible things. And you can look at that stuff and say, well, it's window dressing, or it's the stuff you do to kind of build your brand. But I can tell you that we've had some key recruits this year that have come from billion-dollar companies around the country that are joining Circuit because they fundamentally believe we mean every word we say about what we're trying to do. So culture plays a role when everybody's back is up against the wall. And the only thing that matters is your staff can work anywhere they want now. They're completely decentralized. They can take a job on the West Coast, on the East Coast, anywhere they want. So the only reason to choose to come to an office in Buffalo is they like it better. And so that, I think, is really important. I think that's what the pandemic's taught us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for us, it was really easy in terms of solving education. It's very much relatable to healthcare. Mm-hmm. So in terms of motivating or trying to put forward a value proposition for people to join us was really easy in terms of education. Everyone knows that's an issue right now, especially during COVID. But for us, it has been really impactful to find people and really focus on culture and what makes you really a great team leader. And I think we've been really lucky and fortunate to have been able to find those people throughout that pandemic, because they were so passionate about solving education, because they had their family members, they had their kids or daughters or in school. They could really relate to the problem what we were solving really well. And I think that was one of the reasons why we had a little bit of edge to try to find the best people out there.
Marty, you specifically mentioned management, so I think that what makes a good manager in these hard times?
You don't have to have sleep to do a job well.
Tell me about it.
Now, all kidding aside, I think we were talking about this over dinner, and I think you find out who your leaders are. And, one of the things that we strived on and have always strived in is making sure that when we are recruiting, we hear the word recruitment come up in this, that it's a good fit, not necessarily just from an employer's standpoint. That I always say to folks, a year from now, you should be able to look at me and say to me, you made the best decision in your life. And so, in this past year, I think we found out that we really had a lot of leaders. With us, I think the key to that is that in the banking business, when there's been a market like Buffalo that over the last 10 years has seen a lot of disruption. You mentioned, moving your cheese, and there's a lot of that took place not only from a client perspective, but also from a bank employee perspective. And so when we came into existence 5 years ago, right through this pandemic year, for us it was important that the people that really wanted to join us, for the most part, I think it felt like maybe they had stalled out in their career paths, or that maybe they may have been working just as hard as they've ever worked, but they weren't certain of what their next step looked like. So for us, I think it was providing an assuredness that if you come in, you work hard, find a way to say yes to your clients as much as you can, there's upward mobility. So the promise that we've made to people is upward mobility.
That definitely makes a huge difference, I think, in any company. As an employee, I'm always looking for upward mobility, and that's something that's very attractive for an employer to have when you're a prospective worker. But there are so many growing pains that go along with that. So maybe you can kind of dig into the growing pains associated with starting each of your businesses.
For us, it was healthcare is a really, really conservative industry for any of you who work in it. Pharma is maybe the second most conservative industry, although I would say education is probably close to, and banking isn't far behind. So if you're working at the enterprise and you're trying to convince billion-dollar companies who are making $30 million bets to trust you, they're not going to extend a whole lot of forward credit and time. What they're going to wait and see is, can you live long enough to be relevant? And so, Circuit's story is a very flat line with a lot of near-death experiences for 3 or 4 years. And weirdly, all it took was the end of the world to suddenly create high growth, right? So I never know how much credit, it always ends up accruing to me, but the joke is that one is right business model, really starting with right team, kind of assembled in the hopes that the future would eventually catch up with what we're doing, and then the right situation and take advantage of it. But the fundamental challenge for us is that you are trying to convince very big companies to trust a very small company to handle a problem, a very specific problem that has huge implications. And so the only way you can do that is to be very authentic and to really be able to recruit the kinds of people who are associated with solving that problem in other places. So anybody who thinks they're not in a talent war is in for a very, very difficult lesson in this next year. So, the 2 big wins we had this year is, we were just talking about this, we successfully recruited the head of sales from one of the largest contract research organizations in the world to join Circuit to run commercial for us. That should not be possible, right? That a company in Buffalo, New York can outcompete a $12 billion revenue company. But why is that possible? Because that leader, who happens to be a woman, comes and looks at a company which is 70% female, including half the leadership, and believes that she can come here and lead. That is a major competitive advantage on culture. So is our head of diversity. We pulled her from Bluebird Bio. She starts in a week. And she could work for any top 20 pharma she wants to, and is going to come here because she believes we are absolutely sincere about transforming access to clinical trials as a care option throughout the federally qualified health centers across the country. So if the mission is a good sounding mission, but the leadership actually believes it, your ability to recruit talent all over the country to Western New York is possible, and it's there. And so I think that's the biggest part of this whole challenge, is how do you put that together?
So can we talk about that for a second? Maybe you can dig in a little bit more too. You mentioned having the leadership team kind of resemble what the company looks like is kind of what I believe you're going toward. So talk about that and why that's so important.
Yeah, so we compete on, we compete as a strategy, as a business strategy, we compete on gender and we compete on diversity. And the strategy is that it's a very simple idea, that because very few enterprise organizations think they can compete on gender, any of the scale-ups that are going, that do, will have access to 50% of the talent pool. So you can't convince a blue chip proven pharma leader to leave that job where it's very comfortable for the risk of a startup, unless they fundamentally believe the pieces are in place for them to lead, to actually build and lead inside a company. The company has to look like you actually mean any of that, right? Like, it just fundamentally has to. So we spent a year recruiting somebody onto our board who is an absolute pro in pharma and in technology and in clinical operations, our three wheels, right? So that took a year of sourcing that talent that happens to be a woman. So there's no way you could look at Jackie Kent, who's the chief customer officer for Metadata, and say, oh, that's the woman on Circuit's board. I would get rid of all 4 other directors before I got rid of Jackie, and everybody knows that. I've told them that. So if you do it that way, that you're looking for a specific talent that happens to be a woman, you can recruit amazing people to work in your company. And so that's probably the right framework. You're not, again, as I've heard from friends of mine who mean well, but they'll say, well, we just want the best person for the job. And I'll smile, I'll say, you've got a very homogenous team, so you got to think about what message you're sending. It means that you believe that the most talented people look like that. They absolutely could. But if you take a more expansive point of view, that talent comes in every age range, right? We are 55% millennials. We completely disprove all the myths about millennials. Ours work on weekends when something's important. They don't complain. They're all mission driven, right? So all that's nonsense. It's really all about how do you build the team one person at a time. I was just helping a friend of mine who's getting an early stage tech startup, and they're at 4, and they're great guys. And they all look exactly the same. And they're asking for my input on number 5. And I said, well, she is out there, first of all. And if she's not here at 5, you'll never get her at 10, because she can go lots of places where she's got a friend who's already there. Right? That's just the way it is. And if you don't prioritize really sourcing talent to look for people of color who happen to match the skill sets that you're looking for, or make an investment to get them where they need to be, if you don't get that done by 10, you're not getting it done at 100. It's just the way it is. So it's that combination, and it's good business. The businesses that adopt that, literally we just outcompeted 2 different billion-dollar companies, one in Boston and one in Research Triangle. That should not be possible, but it is, because those leaders come here and they see that we actually mean it.
That's really impressive. And Rohan and Marty, maybe you can kind of weigh in on things that you would avoid in the future, perhaps.
Talk a little bit about it. It's kind of a funny story when we talk about the millennial.
Yep.
And one of my really, really talented young lenders in the company, a couple of years back, wanted me to provide some benchmarking. What's it going to take for me to get to the next level and do different things? So, that year I laid out some benchmarking. And of course, that meant a year later he'd accomplished all those things and a little bit more. And so he came into my office, and you'll get a kick out of my punchline here, but he started to say, well, I've done everything you've asked of me, so I guess the dime's in your court, you got to promote me. And I looked at him and I said, you need to understand one thing. Nobody puts baby in the corner. He looked at me like I had 2 heads. But all kidding aside, I think patience in your hiring practices is so important. We talked about diversity and inclusion and now ESG being such a big part of where we're all headed. I'm proud to say that this past year we've had 34% of our new hires have been diverse in some form or fashion, not all gender, but diverse. And what we've found is that if we're patient in our process and we have a bigger pool to choose from, that we're providing value and we're putting people at the table with a voice at the table. And I think that's been really, really important for us.
Ron?
Absolutely. I think we're talking a lot about the culture of diversity here. But to kind of really echo, what Irfan said about the history, where, Clasabo had a very similar journey where you're trying to sell to schools or universities at first, and horrible sales cycle, right? You're trying to talk to them, 6 months goes by, it's like, yeah, this is awesome, this is great. We don't have the money to pay for it. So it goes on and goes on until there's a point, there's an inflection point, it's like, whoop, right? And that was pre-COVID, right? Where we realized that it's not really an industry problem. It's actually a culture problem with our team. It's a team problem. And we really started investing a lot into culture, like employment, like who are we sourcing? But not only that, past 2 years, we have invested so much resources to our own team to not only upscale, to really figure out mental health. Turn off the computer, turn off the sales, just go home, go out and enjoy. And really, small things like that has given us so much tremendous growth with just a small team. And I'm finally coming to the conclusion that a lot of startups really would ignore culture, because they're all about go-to-market traction, get the revenue, try fund, run after investors, and they're really mortgaging the future. I think culture is really, really important, and diversity also is a big contributor to that success. And we've been around for 4 years now, and this is our 5th year going into it. Diversity has been the primary mode. We have hired all across the board, and our team is consists of, and I was like, okay, yeah, find the best person for the job, who has the skill set. Turns out it's not true, right? You actually want a team that complements with each other, and you really have to invest resources. And we have to turn off the skill-based hiring for more a right personality-based hiring. And I think that has been tremendous for us and really a great learning curve.
Yeah, I love both these points. I'll just echo that there's sort of two messages you have to share at the same time. And between friends, I think they work something like this, right? Like if you're building a great team, you need everybody, right? And Harvard Business School's put this to bed, right? Like the data is really clear that teams that all look alike, and they can look alike in any way you want. I know lots of homogenous teams I have 2 friends who run a company based in Harlem, and I was teasing them that they need to find some, white males between the ages of 30 and 50 because their team is really sending a bad signal on diversity. It did not get the laugh, I thought, but the lesson was there. I ended up getting a lecture, and it was one I deserved. So, but the point is this, is that the way to do this, I think, the insight here that's being shared across the board is that you're not doing it because it's the right thing to do, which it is. And you're not doing it because it builds the America we all want to live in, which it will. But the reason to do it is because you're charged with building great enterprises, and this is a distinctly useful strategic advantage, and there are very few of those left on the game, on the chessboard, right? We just proved it twice. So you'll see these announcements come out in Buffalo Business First. These hires are best in class, and they're just the tip of the iceberg, because once you cross that critical threshold, you start to win consecutively in that way. So that's really the idea, is that you don't need to relax your belief in looking for amazing human beings who are inspirable and are mission-driven and will work extremely hard to accomplish a common goal. But I would just say that all you have to do is believe that those people are everywhere, and they come in every demographic in the country. And finding a few of them that don't look like everybody else on the team is really useful for broadening who you can hire next.
That strategy, though, that you also mentioned is very interesting. I mean, everyone's hiring, right? So many companies don't have the luxury of waiting a year to find that right person. So what's the best strategy, I suppose? Is the best strategy waiting, or do you just hire somebody and hope for the best, prepare for the worst?
Marty and I were just talking about this at dinner. Yeah.
I think having a level of trust in your existing team is really important.
Amen.
And having them trust that if they'll give you a little bit more, to be patient enough to wait for that next hire. Your teams will work harder for you in the interim. And, it's not always monetary compensation. In our cases, it's equity awards,
Yep.
stock awards, and things that come with that. But, I think that starts from the top, and if they see that you're willing to work hard, you're willing to put the extra effort in, and it comes with your own hiring practices. I think making sure that when you look at those personality profiles and you're going through your interviewing process, and make sure that you don't disregard them. I know I read through mine occasionally with disc analysis and different things. It's like, how the hell do they get me so bright? It doesn't work. They still
They ask too many questions.
But I think it's really, really important that you trust your team and they trust in you, that they're never going to have to ask for more money. If they put the work in and they really understand the vision and the sacrifice that needs to be made for the greater good things happen to everybody.
I think that's right. I'll throw an idea. So there's 2 really great ideas packed into that, right? So Netflix is the one that made this kind of standard practice, right? You don't need to go into your boss at Netflix and say, hey, I'm underpaid relative to the market. They run an algorithm that's constantly working throughout the recruiters across Silicon Valley to to figure out what the market rate is, and people typically at Netflix will find that they've been given a raise without asking for one. That's extremely good strategy, right? The other thing they do is say, go test your market value. If you don't think this is you're paid fairly, go ahead and go find out what you're worth. So at Circuit, we take the same approach. We're like, we're not mad at you for going next door and finding out what you could get doing that job someplace else. Let's have the conversation, because the next thing we're going to ask ourselves is, so you've got an offer that you like, that you're thinking about taking. How motivated are we to keep you on the team? And I think that creates a great dynamic. I think that's a really balanced, rather than it being, leadership versus the team, it's really more like, hey, everybody's trying to make the best decision they can for themselves, especially in this day and age, and we want everybody on the team thinking like capitalists. And so, again, another millennial myth that we've dispensed with is that the idea that we're not all capitalists, right? Every monthly when we get the team together, I tease them, I go, I'm an unabashed capitalist. That's not a left or right thing. That's an American thing, and we'll all be capitalists by the time we're done this journey, right? So they're all shareholders, and you ask them to think like owners in a business, and they do. As uniformly, they do. They make great decisions that way. So one is pay people what they're worth, and actually, if you love your team, find out what their market rate is and adjust it accordingly. That goes a long way. Two is they should all be shareholders. And then the last part of that is what we were talking about, is that Circuit's position, our head of talent, who we brought over from Tesla, her mandate is we'd rather hire nobody than hire the wrong person. And we'll run our team hot as a result of that. And with our team, it's a graft versus host response. They don't want to work with bees. They don't want to work with people who slow them down or complain about this or try to cast a sense of doubt over that. They'd rather run with the 60 people they know will play hard at this particular thing we're all doing together until we find the next right person to join that particular team. That's not right for everybody. Doesn't mean Circuit's not a right place to. We had somebody pass on us and send us a lovely letter. So I meet with every employee in that process for an hour. And the goal is really to help somebody decide, are we really what they want to be doing? And we've had a bunch of people passing us after the team loved them and they loved the team, and they've sent our hiring letter, I met with Dr. Khan, and I don't think this is a good fit for me. Circuit's a great company, but not a great company for me. And I thought, what a great use of an hour, right? Like, this incredible person now can go find a job that they like better, and we're not slowed down. That's a good interaction. So I think if you've got all those other pieces in place, you can go with hiring less people, or at least hiring slower.
Absolutely. I think someone, one of my mentors told me, hire slow, fire fast. And I mean, just to, kind of echo Dr. Khan's Netflix culture reference, I really like one of their, beliefs is that they're not a family, they're pro team, right? So they, everyone wants to come work there because it's one of the best places to work. And now that becomes like an exclusivity thing, but at the same time, you can trust your teammates to do the best work for you, and you can actually trust them to do the work, and you can rely on them, and vice versa. So in my company, we really embraced a little bit of that. And, it's rarely that I actually ever make the final decision on who to hire. It's actually my team that does that, because you can trust them that they're gonna, if you hire the right set of folks, and then you trust them with all the decision-making power, they're gonna make sure that they hire the right person. And as someone that they can actually work and be accountable for. And really, they all, most of our employees are all, owners of the company. They get stock options, equity awards, same thing. But they really, truly feel like they're owners of the company. They make the right decision. They have the right set of interests. And in our line of work, the gratification is so instant, right? You're serving a student population. If something's wrong, they're going to tell you. And if something's right, they're going to be a best salesperson. So, it's really, so they hear directly from the consumers, and they just automatically motivates them. And I do agree with that, hire slow, fire fast, but it's really about hiring slow and hiring the right folks first.
So let's talk about that and stay on the issue of hiring. And Dr. Khan, we'll start with you. What are you hiring for in the near future?
So, we're a technology life sciences company, right? So, we span the spectrum. So we do jobs that take very little training or previous skill sets, right? To get on the phone and talk to patients about, would you like to come in, all the way through, full stack developers who can deliver this kind of first ever ratings and reviews platform, and everything kind of in between. Nurses who know how to talk to patients about clinical trials and do the visits and stuff. So it's a pretty broad group, and it leaves you free to think about what kind of team are you building? Has it got the right composition? Has it got the right, but the character of those people, we're very clear on. We've got a ton of data on this, having done it wrong for 4 years or so, 3 years or so, and then done it right for about 2.5. We figured out who's happy at Circuit a year after they work here. And so I love that idea, by the way, Marty, about, so on our cycle, you start at Circuit, you meet with me for an hour, not to interview you for the job, and I always tell that, I go, I'm just here to explain what we're doing, how fast this company moves, how the culture works, here's our 6 values, and here's the 4 characteristics of people who are happy at 1 year based on 5 years of data. This is just a pure data conversation. And the right answer is you choosing yes if you fit that profile, and no if you don't. So you're happy and we're not slowed down, and it's a great use of it. It's the second best outcome. And so, so we have a very clear idea, and you know, the acronym we use is hungry, ambitious for themselves and for the company, happy, we like optimists, and we're really clear on that. That's probably the single best predictor of not happy at Circuit within 6 months is somebody who's dispositionally pessimistic. Humble, right? We're looking for these super talented people, and we got a rack of resumes in a place where it's hard to hire people. We've got no shortage of talent who wants to work here. So we're trying to remind them, you're great, but so is all the other 60 people who joined here. And we like people who know how to play nice in the sandbox, right? And then smart. It's a tough company not to be a pretty clever person at. So because we have a clear picture of what that person dispositionally looks like, you know, hungry, happy, humble, smart, we can just share that with them in the meeting before they join, and they can ask themselves, does that sound like me? And if it doesn't, that's okay. Like, that's good. They'll be happy someplace else. But that's what this team works like. So I think having a clear idea of what the description of the person you want, who you already know from data will be happy a year from now, that's been good for us.
Can I follow up? So what are you actually hiring for?
Like, what kinds of jobs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty broad spectrum. So people in the life science spaces, so people who've got either had experience recruiting patients or nurses in the room, or people who've had, on the marketing side, we're doing that as well. So it's pretty much across the organization. We're at 60 employees. We were at 28 months ago. We'll be at 200 in about 12 months. We're just about to, between friends, we're closing our Series C here shortly. So that capital will all be, most of it's coming in from out of state, and most of it will be deployed right here in Western New York. So that'll be, don't quote me on it, but 20 wouldn't be a shocking number. It'll probably go north of that. So, you know, and that's all built on the stuff that's happening in the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. I should be really clear, like Circuit is a love letter to the Western New York startup ecosystem. We've been supported. If we don't make it, it's nobody's fault but mine, because everybody who could help has been very helpful, including people in this room. So all of that ends up creating jobs right here at home.
Rohan, let's talk about your company, Clasavo. What are you hiring for in the near future?
Absolutely. So, you know, we've been really lucky to not have had any need to spend any dollars in marketing because we exactly know where customers are. So we really wanted to focus on building the sales team first, and that's what we did. We had an investor looked at it, it's like, this is awesome, we can scale it. So they invested, we got around a lot of Buffalonians here to join the company. I think in future is really about growing our sales, and now we're starting to do a lot of marketing, you know, to really go hand in hand with, you know, the sales team. So I think in the near future, we are really looking to scale that sales and marketing team to broad, but also at the same time across all the spectrums, you know, full stack engineers. You know, it's a typical software as a service company, but really also a lot of instructional designers. So it turns out we are really disrupting the textbook business, right? So it's not $200 anymore, it's $20. And however, the other side, the flip side is you really have to walk the professor from start to the finish. You really have to walk their hands. So I think we are really been very successful with experimenting with instructional designers. So I think we're going to go double down on a lot of that investment there.
Marty?
Well, we're a commercial bank, and a lot of people don't really realize this, but we operate from a four-state environment, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and now we just started a Virginia division. And so the beauty of how we're structured is, although all of our hires for Bank on Buffalo are local Western New York hires, and all the decision-making comes from those local folks, we also are hiring in some high-level positions. I'm kind of an example of that, so I can appoint a newly appointed president of Bank on Buffalo, somebody that I've been developing over the past few years, so that I can take a greater role in handling and managing our four-state operation. So we're hiring anything from, you know, department heads and folks that can work at the corporate level and deliver. The head of our treasury management services does not work from our headquarters. You know, the head of all of our revenue lines of business, now me, doesn't work in the headquarters. So, you know, some high-level positions at the holding company. But more importantly, here in Buffalo, for Bank on Buffalo, we're hiring a lot of commercial and industrial lenders. We're big on manufacturing, and you know, a lot of community banks fall in love with commercial real estate lending, and it's not that we don't do a lot of that. We do a couple $100 million a year of commercial real estate lending, mostly multifamily residential type projects. But where we really grew up in, and what we're really good at, is lending to manufacturing and/or commercial and industrial businesses. So right now, my last 4 hires on the commercial loan officer side have all been seasoned commercial and industrial lenders, and then we're supporting that. Even though we talk about people will give us more if we have the culture, there's a limit to that, right?
Yep.
So we're also building infrastructure behind that. We're hiring right now 2 or 3 different portfolio manager positions, credit analyst positions, some of the support that's necessary. You can't always push, once in a while you got to pull back. So we're also hiring some of that infrastructure.
So Marty, is the different lending strategy what really sets Bank on Buffalo apart from other banks in the area?
Yeah, to some degree, the honest answer to banking is, it's not rocket science, right? We swim in the same fish bowl, most of us. But where we think we differentiate to some degree is that most banks of our size are weighted a lot heavier in commercial real estate, as I mentioned. So that's one piece. But I think the more important piece is that we have lending authority still. We don't go to a committee environment until a business borrows more than $5 million from us. That's a local pen that I can control, and we can make those decisions quick. And our speed to street, our flexibility, I think, is really what separates us. And that's why we operate in a decentralized environment. I can brag all day long about a 4-state operation and having 5 divisions, doing all these things. But the reason why we don't bring people on the lending side in from out of town is they don't have the history with people that live and breathe and operate these businesses in Buffalo. So from our perspective, the most important piece is give people authority, give them a lot of rope to run on, but also give them the accountability. So the biggest difference for us is speed to street, flexibility. And the other thing that you'll hear me say a lot publicly, and it's on the walls of every lunchroom in our bank, is that we really, really, really mean this, is in every situation, whether it's our employees, our clients, or our community, find a way to say yes every time. And the key word in that is find. Because if you're really trying to find the way, it really means we're understanding our clients, and it may not be exactly what they asked for, but we're finding a way to get them to the finish.
Dr. Kine, let me move to you. Speaking of finding a way, you left practicing medicine. What was that like for you? What led to that decision, and how did that help you shape your company?
Yeah, so it should all be put in the context of I'm married to a very patient radiologist. That makes it a lot easier, right? So that indulgence cannot be overstated. My dad got Parkinson's about 5 years ago. I've spent my whole career in clinical trials. I brought a bunch of them over to Buffalo when I came. And Parkinson's has been a very long, slow road for clinical trials. So we watched a bunch of them fail. I had been running some experiments on putting cardiology trials into the outpatient setting where doctors who had never done research before could be successful. And those went well. And it opened this kind of idea that, I could kind of just, keep putting in defibrillators and ablating, arrhythmias, which is a lot of fun. I can't say it enough. And Mercy is a great hospital to work at. I had a blast doing it. But it did feel like there was this opportunity to solve at this particular problem. And once that idea kind of got lodged in the head, like every founder story, it's like, all right, I guess I'll go do that. And so that was really the nidus. It was the idea that we probably won't get there in time for my dad, but we will get there in time for lots of other people's dads and moms and sisters and brothers, and that's good work. And it's an opportunity to operate at scale. And I think Buffalo is the right place to build a company like that. I say it all the time when people talk about Circuit's journey. I'm like, well, if you were going to build a life science technology company, the right time and place to do it was in Buffalo in 2015, when everything just kind of lined up and there was everybody trying to help you in every possible way. And that's really what Circuit is. It's like from Launch New York, Western New York Impact Fund, all these different players that have come together, 43 North, can't say enough about it. So that was part of the key. And just to double back to that last question, I forgot the audience. We are definitely interested in content creators and marketers and salespeople. That is a big part of the hiring plan this year. So, Rachel Ernisi, who's over here taking photos for us, is a good example of what we look for, right? Rachel came to Circuit 8 months ago and completely transformed our look and feel. We did a presentation to Google 1 week after she came that she built from scratch. The Verily team is like, well, who do you source your graphic design work with? And I'm like, yeah, no, we have that in-house. And they're like, well, this is really great stuff. We'd love to talk to them about it. I'm like, yeah, that's the difference. One person can make a difference. Usually it's for the worse, but that's a good example of somebody making a difference for the better.
And she made
right?
the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Massive impact. Massive impact. So, we are absolutely looking for help on the content side, on the marketing side too. So, yeah, ping me or Rachel.
Rohan, talk about how you came up with the idea for your company. You mentioned specifically that you had originally thought that universities would be the best customer, but it turns out perhaps not to be the case.
Absolutely not. So So, the Clausel the idea came to me when a mathematics professor approached me to co-author his math textbook, which was centered around high school students and early college students. And he was trying to teach students how to program one of those graphing calculators. Let me just say this book is as interesting as it sounds. I did not want to read this, and I definitely knew high school students were not going to read it. So that's where I really had the epiphany to, figure this out. Like, tuition has increased to 1,700% since the 70s, more than healthcare. And along with the rising cost of tuition is also the cost of materials that goes along with it. One of the big developments since then we have had, in the big monopoly, big box publishers, is that they have taken that static textbook, converted it into a PDF form, and knocked out 10 bucks off the retail price, right? So this is where really, we wanted change. We could have solved this, where the textbook could be more interactive, more graphic, could be customizable. You take a textbook, you can, have 3D models with it. It's no longer like a cell membrane is a moving thing, right? It's just a photo on a piece of paper. It doesn't really do justice. I mean, you can really see it in 3D elements. That's really what we wanted to solve, and that's what we did. Just to come to the conclusion, we started selling to universities. Realized, horrible way to do it, right? We went straight to the decision makers, which were professors, and the students paid only $20 instead of $200 now. So we came around the full circle. Throughout this whole time, University of Buffalo has been really supportive. They gave us the initial seed capital, they gave us the office space, and they really became a truly a symbiotic partner, right? We would sneak across the the buildings, go into classrooms and sit in classes that used our product and see how they used it. And we would sneak into classrooms that did not use our product and see what the challenges were. We'd go back to the office, we'd build it. We are probably one of the fastest edtech startups in the world that have iterated the product to so many times to really achieve that product market fit, right? And throughout this time, even local community leaders and mentors have really helped to shape and narrow it down. And I would like to highlight one of our recent partners that came on board, Alley-oop. They invested in the company to build a really sales team. We are, all right, the product's great. How do we sell this to from X amount of schools to like every single school in the country? So they're really helping us get to the next level. And I'm really excited and grateful, for more future to come.
So let's talk about, we're in a room full of marketing and sales professionals here. What specific sales strategies are you using at this point to really up your sales?
Great question.
Thank you.
Oh man.
It's written here for me.
I wish I
But you read it great.
I told you, good at reading in class.
We're fortunate where we exactly know where customers are. We know what they teach, what their phone numbers are, what the emails are. We do direct straight emails, and we've got about 25% reply rate, about 7 to 8% demo rates, which is extremely high. And I showed it to a sales investor, and they're like, "Why are you selling free candy?" I was like, "No, it's just over the last 3-4 years, we've really honed into narrowing the target market." So we had this idea about postcards, sending postcards, and COVID hit us, and no one's in the office. So we were kind of starting that kind of again, and to see really what's going to come out of it. But really, your traditional Zoom to call. We don't have to travel to universities or talk to professors. It's all on the internet. It's really fast.
Dr. Khan.
Yeah, so maybe not quite that fast. It's interesting. When we look at it, the sales channels that we started with we don't use any of those channels anymore. So, we were trying to experiment with kind of, if you've read Gabe Weinberg's book, Traction, he kind of lays out these 17 different ways to think about it. Really wonderful book. It's been one of our book of the months for the team. So we've run a lot of unsuccessful experiments, which if you run experiments, that's great, right? Because you've solved for, hey, what won't work, what won't scale for us. And what we found is that and it's still true now. I just got back from the West Coast from the first set of in-person conferences. Conferences are a great way. They actually work really well for us because leadership often comes to those, decision makers come to those. We have a kind of a national brand now. I used to joke about it last year. It's not so much true anymore, but we're nationally known and speak. Our team speaks at these conferences, but at home in Buffalo, we're still seen as a 43 North startup, which is great, but it is kind of, I'm like, we're kind of famous like everywhere else. Like,
How do we get out of that?
Yeah, so it's been good. Like I think this last year has sort of solved for that. But so conferences are great for us, and then so much of pharma is really like you have to be engaged into the existing network. So we built a sales team this year that we're really proud of. 4 really great hires with Dana Edwards coming on shortly to run the whole thing on commercial. That is how we found it was really the right place, because pharma is making such big critical bets that they want to work with people they actually understand the space, know delivery, all the rest of that stuff. What we've learned, though, is there's an opportunity to build a really useful content channel and for the work that we do, especially in community oncology and diversity in clinical trials. We are the thought leaders nationally in this. I write on it, speak on it, travel on it, all that good stuff. And we really don't have the team to do that yet. And so, really we just, again, with Rachel, we upgraded our look and feel of what circuit stuff looks like. And now we need that next level, which is how do we do the storytelling? Because people do want that from us. They want white papers and all the rest of that stuff. So in healthcare, and in particular in drug development and in healthcare sales, it's really about they want to work with people who either know things they don't, which Circuit candidly does, or they've worked with before. And so we've built that team in place. Those are really the channels for the work we do. But that took 4 years to figure out, really, and we're still kind of scaling into it. So it's really interesting which channels work and which ones don't.
Marty, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, I operate kind of on a three-legged stool from the standpoint of general marketing and advertising. And we've been building a brand as Bank on Buffalo, and how do you differentiate yourself? And I've always thought of, brand and image are two different things. Image, you can put my ugly mug on a billboard, that's an image, but I think that the brand is how people feel once they've had a chance to interact with you. And so we're really still in the brand building stage here after just 4.5 or 5 years of existence here in Buffalo. But the three-legged stool really is an internal marketing, sales and marketing group at our headquarters. But then we also have a creative ad agency that we work with, and then also a PR firm. And I pick on my PR firm and tell them I want 2 stories out of every one. And it's building the brand from that standpoint. I would also say that just from an advertising or a marketing standpoint, that we're starting to go down the path of innovation and utilizing from a digital platform more and more of what we can do there. It's this creepy conversation that we all have to have, right? But we're pulling all of our data in. We've got artificial intelligence. We've got big data, as everybody talks about, and we're looking at all of these automated marketing solutions. You can be shopping for your vacation getaway in Naples, Florida tomorrow morning, and I might just know who you were with and what you were talking about. So how do you use that? How do you use all of this data and do it without being creepy in the process?
Yep.
And that's part of what we're trying to work through right now. Also, even with direct mail pieces, we've been doing more and more things to geofence some of our direct mail, so there's more of a targeted direct mail and you get the response rates that you're looking for. So those are just a few things.
I do want to open it up for questions from the audience also, so we've got about 5 or so minutes left. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and shout it out. Go ahead.
So I was lucky enough to meet each of you about 4 years ago. You were giving a pitch at the incubator at UC, and you were talking about how you're going to run your company, and somebody asked you how is it going to be scalable. You're still talking about going to universities. And you said, I believe passionate people will always find a way to scale.
Amen.
You said basically the same thing to 43 North. You said basically the same thing when there were just 4 of you here in Buffalo. And it seems like all of you have found an amazing way to connect with passionate people who now feed your business. And I would love it if you could talk about how you zero in on the people who have that passion, because each of you has a different kind of passion, right? Educators, scientists, business people. But you've all come to make that connection. I think all of us as sales and marketing people would love to know, how do you connect to someone else's passion when you've never met them?
That's a great question.
I've actually struggled with that. I'm an introvert at heart, but if you're a CEO, you have to be extrovert. You have to go out and talk to people. So when I first started, I would have to go talk to professors. And there was time where they wouldn't want to talk to me. There was this professor, he thought I was a textbook reseller, very far. And he literally put a no textbook resellers allowed. He posted outside his door. And I had a decision to make here. Either I don't bother him or I actually bother him. And it was a very courageous, I was fearful, and I guess next day I knocked on his door. He was livid. But he ended up becoming our customer. He loved it so much. So I think what I've learned is I do have to go out and talk to people. One of the best engineers I've ever hired was at Starbucks. He was a 17-year-old kid. He was just doing his thing, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing there? And he actually wrote, within the first 3 months we hired him, we got not only our first initial cohort of customers, fastest revenue-making thing, and it's amazing. So I have to learn how to go out and network and talk to people. But it was definitely not natural to me. I think I've just kind of acquired it and kind of embracing a lot more right now.
I too am an introvert. No.
I was going to disagree with that.
Deep down.
Some say
We
fake
all-
it till you make it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll share that I personally believe, and I'm rarely proven wrong about this, while there are people who aren't a great fit for circuit. In fact, I would say it's probably sitting somewhere around 50% of how we start at the top of the funnel. We really think are good fits for us, that we really want to go to that next level and sort of see, hey, can we tell a story here that makes sense for them? But that doesn't mean they're not inspirable and they're not passionate about things. In my day-to-day life, I find people just fundamentally interesting. And my experience has been that almost everybody I've met, with very few exceptions, is passionate and is actually looking for a mission that matters, right? So, these ideas are a couple thousand years old, right? The Stoics would say that it's work that matters and people you love, right? Freud would say the same thing, right? None of it changes, right? It's in the Bible, it's in every religious textbook you can think about. So it's got to have some truth to it, that each of us fundamentally, especially in our adult life, it's why actually in the blurb I do when I spend an hour with the prospective hires, I just pointed out that we don't believe in work-life balance as a concept. I think it's actually a really dangerous idea that has taught a generation of young Americans that their adult work is not a true expression of who they are. I think that's a crazy idea. I think your adult work is short of your relationships. It's the next best business card for what you're all about and what you're capable of and what you mean to the world. So we just kind of deprogram them. And we've had people in the who choose not to come to circuit cite that sentence. Well, Dr. Khan said he doesn't believe in work-life balance. And I'm like, so maybe I haven't explained it as clearly, because the next sentence is always that we just think the term is wrong. And we really think it's really about people are looking for work that matters. I think all of us are looking for work that matters. When we're happy, we've got work that matters. We like our colleagues. We like the person we report to and believe they play a fair game. And the work actually adds up to something. I think that's what every single person I've ever met is hoping for. The only way you can create that and kind of turn that light bulb on in somebody is if you truly believe that. And if you truly believe you're building a company that will create that opportunity. So I love what you said, Marty. What I say to people is that I come to work trying to build the company, help build the company that will be the best work experience you've ever had. So we want to be a great interview. We want to be the best place you've ever worked at. And should you move on, should you get a better opportunity, then we want to be a great company to be from, right? And we steal that right from Netflix. Like, Netflix is proud to be a great company to have on your resume. So is Circuit. Circuit's already put people in pharma and the CRO space. We don't view those as losses. They're alumnus, and we're really proud of them, right? We talk about them. So, that's tricky to do. It's really hard to do, but if you're really focused that you think your mission is actually changing the world, if you truly believe that, people can pick that up regardless of what the mission is.
Marty, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think with me, I'm about as far removed as a typical bank executive as you could probably get, and I take pride in that. I guess where I'm going to go with that is I think just being genuine, and there's another saying I use every once in a while is, hire the sizzle and train the rest, right? I mean, you really want to hire people that have some excitement, have some passion, some skill set that that they'll fully utilize, and I think that's a big part of it as well. But more than anything, it's just simple. I think being genuine, and when somebody comes in, they're making a career choice based on a family need or an individual need or some aspiration that they have, and we're not here to sell them a bill of goods. If it's not a fit, like you were saying, then it's not a fit for them or us. And I think trust, bringing people in and empowering them and trusting them with that. I'm forever telling our folks, look, don't be afraid to make mistakes, and please don't wait until it's perfect before you try it, right? Now, don't give me a quarter killer, but, but there's a limit to all of that. But I think that's, take the fear out of them. Bank's not going to fail tomorrow morning because you made a bad loan decision. You made 10 or 12 in a row, money. But don't be afraid to make mistakes and trust each other. I think that's a big part of it.
Time for one more question. Anyone? Well, let me tell you, I am passionate about storytelling, and I am passionate about being on TV, and 2 o'clock comes a lot earlier than you might think. So we'll wrap this up. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It is a genuine honor and privilege to be with all of you, and I would be genuinely honored if you would tune into Channel 7 tomorrow morning starting at 5. Have a good night, everyone.
That was amazing. Good job. Thank you so much.
Thanks.